The AFC North is one of my favorite divisions in the NFL and some of my favorite divisional games. There's usually tough defense and high end talent. And this year, I don't see that being any different. Usually the games are close, fun, and competitive, and I'm hoping for some more really great AFC North football this year. In the 2024 season, the Baltimore Ravens won the division with a 12-5 record. Pittsburgh finished in second and got back to the playoffs at a 10-7 record. Cincinnati and Joe Burrow missed the playoffs at 9-8, and the Cleveland Browns were 3-14, good enough to be the second worst team in the NFL. Today, we're continuing my division preview series on the channel and talking AFC North football. Let's get into it. Finishing in fourth place in the AFC North, I have the Cleveland Browns with a record of 4-13, missing out on the playoffs. Listen, let's just be honest. The Browns continue to be one of the NFL's most entertaining TV shows, from Myles Garrett's Super Bowl media press tour to drafting Dillon Gabriel and then Shedeur Sanders on draft night, and whatever the hell is going on with Quinshon Judkins. This team is just always a mess. I really feel bad for you Browns fans, because in my entire lifetime, I think the best you've ever been was that one season with Baker Mayfield, and then your ownership and front office group drove him out of the building. It's been an absolute disaster of an organization, and I don't see that changing this year. There are some positives, though, that I do think could be highlighted going forward into the future for Cleveland. However, we do have to start with some question marks when we talk about the offense. The quarterback room of Joe Flacco, Kenny Pickett, Shedeur Sanders, and Dillon Gabriel has to be one of the oddest quarterback rooms I've seen in a long time in the NFL. You have a veteran in Joe Flacco, who's probably the best guy on the roster at this point in time, but doesn't really present an opportunity for you to succeed in the future. Kenny Pickett, who I feel at this point is a career backup, a fine backup, a game manager at that, but again, what's your ceiling with Pickett? Dillon Gabriel, who you drafted before Shedeur Sanders, who, to be quite frank, I don't think is very talented, but the coaching staff seem to like him, and I guess he's one of those firm handshake, good head on his shoulders type of guys. And then Shedeur, who is most certainly the most talented player on the roster, but the headaches, the question marks with IQ, and all the drama, is it worth it for the Browns to have him be a starter or just on the roster at all at this point, especially if he's not going to start? If he's not going to start and not even your backup, you have to consider, is it worth it for Cleveland to have Shedeur Sanders and all the question marks? Or are we going to be looking at a Tim Tebow, Johnny Manziel attention spotlight that just maybe isn't good enough from a talent perspective for the team? I don't know, but it's certainly something that the Browns will have to consider. Again, my guess is Joe Flacco starts and Dillon Gabriel at some point gets in this season, because that's the guy that the coach has picked. When you look at the running back room, a couple months ago, I would have told you this could be one of the better running back rooms in football. Going from Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt a couple years ago and Jerome Ford to Quinshon Judkins, Dylan Sampson, and still having Jerome Ford, but more as the third back, looked very promising. However, now when I look at it, and there is just a sense of, hey, what's going on with Quinshon Judkins? And I'm not going to even begin to speculate, but it is possible he's just not there to play. And then Dylan Sampson, I think, is a much better pass catcher, B-level back. Do you have him and Jerome Ford as a tandem? How exciting is that? I'm just not sure what's going on again. The wide receiver room, or the receiving weapons, I should say. This is an actual bright spot for Cleveland that I don't think is spotlighted enough because of all the drama. But Jerry Jeudy was a top 10 guy in terms of receiving yards last year. He may have really found a home in Cleveland. You remember, this was a former first-round pick, a guy who could be a true one still. David Njoku, I think one of the most, if not the most underrated tight end in football. I like Cedric Tillman. He was on a real roll last year and then got hurt. You drafted Harold Fannin Jr., who could be a real vertical threat receiving tight end, a solid piece there. And then an offensive line that's in the bottom half of the NFL, but maybe the team figures it out. All in all, the offense has a lot of question marks at the guys who make the decisions, who's going to be the quarterback, and even now at the running back room. But there are little sprinkles of excitement and on this Browns roster. The defense does, to an extent, have me feeling kind of nicey. The defensive line of Myles Garrett, Mason Graham, and just some guys is going to be good enough. Myles Garrett, for Browns fans, just extending him this offseason and keeping one of the best players in your franchise's history around has to be considered a W. Denzel Ward, Delpit, Newsome, really nice pieces. There have been some injuries to the defense, though, in terms of JOK, Emerson, and then Jordan Hicks retiring. So a lot going to be on the shoulders of rookie linebacker Carson Schlesinger, something to watch out for. And if you're not a Browns fan, maybe a name to learn. All in all, if I was a Browns fan, I guess what I'd be hoping for this season is, can we please find success with one of the 4 quarterbacks on our roster? But as a non-Browns fan, and just an NFL guy, you know, you got me sitting here thinking, it's probably not going to be something good. Again, similar to the way that I talked about the Colts. Defense is going to be good. There's going to be some skill position guys that pop off game to game, but none of the quarterbacks on the roster really give me high level potential winning. So I have them last in this division, and I have them improving, I guess, to 4 wins. Finishing in 3rd place in the division, I have the Cincinnati Bengals with a record of 9-8, once again missing out on the playoffs. I used this quote the other day in a video, but I'm going to double back and use it again. Albert Einstein once said, "The definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results." That's how I feel about the 2025 Bengals. What are they doing differently from the 2024 Bengals? Nothing. In fact, they may be moving on from Trey Hendrickson, which is a downgrade. Yet, I'm supposed to believe we're going to get different results. The same head coach, Zach Taylor, Joe Burrow, T. Higgins, Jamar Chase, Chase Brown as your offensive core, a subpar offensive line, a defense that doesn't have a lot of talent on it, with or without Trey Hendrickson, to be completely honest with you. They did make a change at defensive coordinator, but I got to be honest. I don't think it was the coordinator. I think it's the lack of talent, and I think it's the lack of team building. Ultimately, I don't see this team going all in on offensive skill, betting on the same group of guys that couldn't get the job done last year, and it actually being right, and it actually making this team a contender. I love Joe Burrow. I think he's a top 4 quarterback in the sport, but you need a little bit more than just flashy offensive pieces to win in the NFL. And like I mentioned, when it comes to the Cincinnati Bengals offense, they are going to be electric, one of the most fun offenses to watch. And if I was drafting a fantasy football team, having as many Bengals on that team as possible is a good thing, because their games are going to look similar to what they did last year. Joe Burrow and his boys are going to have to put up 30, 35, even 40 in some instances to win football games. You remember both games that they had with the Baltimore Ravens last year? Some of the best football we saw all season. Electric play after electric play. That's going to keep happening. Cincinnati's defense is not going to be able to stop a nosebleed, let alone Lamar Jackson twice a year. So the offense, Joe Burrow, going to be a beast. And if they win enough games, I think he could be an MVP guy. Hell, if they had just won 11 games last year, he would have been the MVP. In the weapons, still great. Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, Chase Brown, Yoshabas, Gesicki. You brought in Noah Fant at this point. Apparently Jermaine Burton's having a good camp. The offensive line, it's pretty bad, but maybe you can get good play from Brown and Mims, and you moved on from Alex Kappa, which is addition by subtraction. Again, the offense is going to be super fun. When you look at the defense, there's nothing else to talk about other than what the fuck's going on with this Trey Hendrickson situation. I don't know if this team could keep above water without paying Hendrickson. And from all accounts, Hendrickson wants to be with the team and is trying his hardest. Maybe this is something that comes to an agreement. They figured out the Shamar Stewart situation and now he's practicing with the team. But outside of those two guys, Cam Taylor-Britt, I just don't know what else there is to be excited about, which is, again, why I can't see this team improving. This defense and that offensive line didn't get better this offseason. Like I said, the Bengals kind of had a disaster offseason on a ton of levels. I wouldn't have extended T. Higgins for the price that they did. I would have added to the defense and added to the offensive line for that money. I love T. Higgins, but you had Jamar Chase, you had Yoshavas, you had a draft pick where you could have brought in another receiving threat. You didn't need to commit, what was it? I mean, close to $70 million a year, maybe more than that, to Chase and Higgins in one offseason. You needed to pay Trey Hendrickson. The defense is going to die out there without him. Shamar Stewart situation, I'm not going to lie. I don't side with the Bengals on a ton, and you could look into the situation on your own time. I did kind of get it. I did kind of get it from their perspective, but I got to be honest. I think Cincinnati is going to have another 9-8 season. Joe Burrow is going to be at a peak performance. They're going to waste another year of his prime, and Zach Taylor is probably going to get the axe because of it. Finishing in second place with a 10-7 record and sneaking into the playoffs as the 7th seed, I have the Pittsburgh Steelers. And before we talk about Aaron Rodgers' new team, the Pittsburgh Steelers, I want to remind you to hit that subscribe button. If you love the NFL, this can be your central hub for all NFL content. Preview series like this, tier lists, instant game reactions, instant news reactions, you name it, it is here on the channel. If you love the NFL, hit that subscribe button. Let's get back to the video. Listen, at this point, I think the Pittsburgh Steelers are Thanos levels of inevitable, where they're just going to find a way to be a plus 500 team and get into the playoffs year after year for a little while. Once I started doing this YouTube thing and TikTok, whatever, and making predictions, and I just found myself betting against the Pittsburgh Steelers because on paper, I questioned the offensive firepower. And in my younger football days, I was like, you don't have enough offensive firepower. You know, I was in the Bengals are going to win the Super Bowl stage. And now I'm matured and I look at the Steelers and I say, hey, I don't know if they can win a Super Bowl, but this organization is damn good at winning, damn good at defense, and damn good in the trenches. And they got enough offensive skill pieces this year, might be their best in years, to be honest, that I'm pretty confident that Pittsburgh, if healthy, will be a playoff team in 2025. We start with the offense, and where else but quarterback Aaron Rodgers, who is now 2 years removed from his Achilles tear, but is 41 years old. And you go back and forth on this because how good is Aaron Rodgers going to be? When you look at the statistics of last year, he was actually a pretty solid quarterback. But on the eye test, aside from that game versus Jacksonville, did he ever really pop or come off the screen to you in a game as an impressive player? Not really. But even if he's just kind of middle of the pack, is he better than Russell Wilson? Is he better than Justin Fields? Is he better than Mason Rudolph? How about Kenny Pickett? How about Duck Hodges? 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers has a shot to be the best quarterback that the Steelers have had since Ben Roethlisberger. And I know it's kind of the same argument that we made about Russell Wilson last year, but the team was 10-7 and in the playoffs last year. So I think it's a fair projection. And at a high end, if Aaron Rodgers follows the Brett Favre career trajectory, great with the Packers, shit with the Jets, great with the Vikings and in an NFC championship. I'm not trying to hype you up, Steelers fans, but if he's really going to follow it, he's going to be great with the Steelers and better than we expect. And he does have the weapons, I think, to be better than we expect. The team went and traded for DK Metcalf, who, yes, they traded away Pickens, so how much did they get better? Sure, but DK Metcalf is a better player than George Pickens, at least in my estimation. Size, speed, strength, he can high point the ball, yak ability, it's all there. He's not going to kill you with a ton of receptions every game, but he makes them count. Jonnu Smith brought into this team a real vertical threat receiving tight end to pair alongside Pat Freiermuth, and you have a speedy Calvin Austin. And the run game is going to be very solid. I think Arthur Smith drafted Caleb Johnson for a reason. This is going to be a run-first football team that relies on Aaron Rodgers to be a distributor and to make the right decisions on third down and mediums when he needs to be. But Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren, Kenny Gainwell, the team is 3 running backs deep for a reason. And we all know Arthur Smith wants to run the damn ball. And with his offensive line, I think he should be able to. One of the youngest in football. I love the right side from Frazier to McCormick to Fatanu. We'll see with Broderick Jones and Siamalu what that left side of the line ends up actually being. But I do have some belief in what the Pittsburgh Steelers are building in the offensive line trenches. I do have my reservations about how good of an offense Arthur Smith can lead, but with the talent that's there in Pittsburgh, and hey, I think Aaron Rodgers is better than what they've had, they should be serviceable enough for that defense. And speaking of that defense, Pittsburgh has once again a top 10 defense in the NFL. PFF's #1 ranked defensive line with guys like TJ Watt, Cam Hayward, Derek Harmon, the rookie that they drafted, Herbig, Highsmith, you name it. They got bodies on that line. Patrick Queen as a linebacker, like up front, this is a very, very dangerous group. And in the secondary, it's pretty solid. The team traded for Jalen Ramsey. You have Porter, you have Slay, Thornhill. Like, this is a very, very good secondary as well. I don't think it's, top of the league secondary. I don't think that they're in those conversations, but I think it is a top 10 unit, not top 5, maybe top 5, but not top 3. It's late. Let me breathe. Mike Tomlin always has a good defense. We know this. The talent's there. TJ Watt back. Steelers fans got to be thrilled about that. And again, the defensive identity of this team, as it has for years, will hold down the fort. At this point in time, I just refuse to bet against the Pittsburgh Steelers being a playoff team. If I'm wrong, I guess I'm wrong, and this is just the year that it happened. But at the end of the day, I'm not going to go against everything that I've seen and, try and predict this is the year that Pittsburgh finally falls off the wagon, when I actually think the roster is more talented this year than it's been at least in the last half decade. But finishing both first in the division and first in the conference, I have the Baltimore Ravens at a record of 13-4, and of course, yes, they are back in the playoffs. The Baltimore Ravens have one of the most talented rosters in football that I have seen in a long time. On the offensive side of the ball, you have two lock Hall of Famers in Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. You brought in a DeAndre Hopkins, who should be a Hall of Famer. You still have Andrews, likely. Like, you get it. The offensive talent's there. The defensive talent's there. A 13-win, 14-win, 15-win regular season. It's all on the board for Baltimore. Being the 1 seed in the AFC, hell, I'm predicting it. But at the end of the day, at this point, if you're a Ravens fan, at this point, if you're Lamar Jackson, the regular season success, crumple it up and throw it out the window. This team is focused on January and potentially February, and they have the roster to be thinking in that mindset. Now, the offense is going to be one of, if not the best offense in football, and it starts with Lamar Jackson, who, in my estimation, has been the best quarterback in the NFL through the regular season for the last 3 years. He easily could have won MVP last year. He had a phenomenal year. 41 passing touchdowns to only 4 interceptions. The guy is just at another level right now when he plays football. The decision making is there. And those 4 interceptions, by the way, you could very easily argue that 3 of them at least were not on him. He had a nearly flawless regular season. Didn't win the MVP. Tough luck there. We could have that debate another time. I get where you're coming from, though, Ravens fans. You look at his weapons. Derrick Henry came in, and hey, what do you know? Derrick Henry on the Ravens with Lamar Jackson was a huge fucking success. Who could have guessed? That guy is a lock Hall of Famer. Zay Flowers really developing into a wide receiver 1. Andrews and Likely. I think we do see a little bit of a passing of the torch this year, but Likely dealing with a foot injury, so it's nice that you have Andrews. Bateman and Hopkins, as well as 4th and 5th options, are really, really solid in the passing game. The offensive line still solid, with Stanley and Linderbaum leading the way, just like last year. It's going to be a top 5 offense, and it's probably going to be the best rushing attack in all of football. And much like the offense being top 5, I expect the defense to also be a top 5 unit. We all know that they can be. They may have the best secondary in all of football, with Jair Alexander, Marlon Humphrey, and Nate Wiggins at cornerback. That could be 1 to 2 all-pros right there. And Kyle Hamilton and Malachi Starks, I'll plant my flag. By the end of the year, we're all consensusly saying that is the best safety duo in football. Kyle Hamilton, we all know he could easily be an all-pro, but I think Malachi Starks might be the defensive rookie of the year. In Roquan Smith, top 2 linebacker in football, top 2, not 2. Hey, that's up to you. That's up to you. I still got Fred. And an underrated defensive line, Matabuke, Van Noy, Travis Jones. And oh yeah, in the 2nd round, we let the Baltimore Ravens draft Mike Green, who I think easily was a round 1 talent. They got Starks and Mike Green, 2 top 20 overall players in my estimation. They killed the fucking draft, killed it on the defensive side of the ball, and brought in Jair. This is now one of the best defensive units in football, and if you told me it was the best defensive side of the ball, I wouldn't argue with you. And listen, at the end of the day, you don't win the title on paper. You are not paper Super Bowl champions. But the Ravens and that front office did all it damn could to make this team as good as it can be. You could say on paper, they have the best offense and defense in football. You have a great head coach in John Harbaugh, an MVP candidate quarterback in Lamar Jackson. Now, it's time to put up or shut up. This team has to get it done. And I think over a regular season, they absolutely will. And I think that they certainly have the potential to make that push in the playoffs as well. Hell, I'm rooting for Lamar to have his massive success in the playoffs the way he does in the regular season. We'll see if it happens. And this team is so good that success in September and October, it's nice, but it's not what this team is striving for. They want January, February success. And I think this could be the year. To recap, I have the standings as the Baltimore Ravens finishing in first in the division at 13-4. The Pittsburgh Steelers finishing in second in the division and making the playoffs at 10-7. The Cincinnati Bengals 9-8 missing the playoffs. And the Cleveland Browns 4-13 also missing the playoffs. The AFC North always features some of the hardest hitting football in the league. And despite some of the talent gaps, it's going to remain that way in 2025. I cannot wait. Drop your predictions in the comment section down below. And again, if you love the NFL, hit that sub button, hit the like button. I'll catch you next time. Peace.